Hi and welcome. Thanks for joining us. This is your show, and I'm Mark Stenabaugh, your host. And joining with me, again as usual, is Peggy Pratt, our resident vocalist. And this week's guest is Bill Oja. Now, for those of you who are country music fans, most of you will probably recognize the paper that I'm now showing called Country Music News, the voice of country music in Canada. And Bill is one of the writers for this newspaper. And Bill, I've got to admit that you're probably one of the keenest reporters that I've ever met. And I met Bill at another event where we were both judges. Actually, all three of us were there, and that's how we met, for those of you who are at all interested. Last Halloween, Danny's Ho-Ho had their annual Halloween costume party, and they had a panel of judges, and we were all on it, and it was such a great time. And when I knew I was going to do a show, I said, you guys have got to be on it. Bill?
I'd like to say the outfit that you wore as a judge, you came in third and you weren't even entered in the contest.
That's right. They said, oh, what a wonder, and I wasn't even dressed up. That's the worst part. Anyways, Bill is from Hamilton, and he's a reporter on the side. He works for the Hamilton Board of Education as his full-time job, but probably he's good enough, I think, that he could be a full-time reporter. How did you get involved in being a columnist for this newspaper?
Well, 18 or 20 years ago, my daughters had their own dance band, and I just created some publicity for them and what have you. And they got booked about 6 months or a year ahead of time, and I got so many requests for bookings for them that I applied for a license, and little by little I got into the entertainment business. I was a booking agent for about 15 years. I ended up specializing, if I can call the word specialize, in country music. I had 13 bands working for me and ended up doing some television and what have you. Country Music News started about 14 years ago in Ottawa, and they asked me, because I was traveling around and knew what was going on, they asked me if I'd do a little column. I said, well, I'm really not a writer, but I do know all the gossip that's going on. So I started to write for them, and now I write for 3 different papers. This one's my pet. Country Music News, by the way, has 50,000 readers. We're now into 17 countries. So
I think it's very interesting. Bill was telling us before we come on the air that they even have a reader who subscribes in Somalia. And I just think that that's the total opposite side of the earth from us, and they're reading the same newspaper that we are.
Australians, New Zealand, Romania, 3 or 4 subscribers in Africa.
How often is the Country Music News printed?
Once a month.
Now, you said you wrote for 3 newspapers.
Yes.
What are the other 2?
Hammer magazine out of Hamilton, that has 40,000 readers. I submit our articles to Traditions, which is a Stony Creek paper, country music, and I also submit articles to RPM magazine, which is a radio magazine.
I think you also to the Brant News here in our county.
Oh, I submit articles all over the place. If it's country music, I promote it pretty good.
And when you say 14 years ago, country wasn't really in there, was it? So it had to be a tough.
It was rough. You have a book, a binder full of country bands. They've all got hats on and cowboy boots on, and you walk into a bar. I've been escorted to the door many, many times. And I'll tell you, and you know, Peggy and Mark, that things have changed in the past few years. They welcome you now when you come in, because it's a moneymaker. Just for example, in the United States, there are 4,400 radio stations. 2,600 are country music. And the same trend is happening here in Canada. Now, my big thing is...
Excuse me.
I hate it when he does that.
Yes. Surely he's going to...
Your cord was falling out in public, and I just wanted to fix it.
That's bad. I'm going to have to stop doing that. First, you get their attention, Mark. That's part of show business.
Just carry on. I'll be okay in a minute.
But Canadian country music stations could play a much bigger part in all of this. I interviewed George Hamilton IV, a gospel country singer out of Nashville, who's toured Canada an awful lot, and he tours the world. And he was telling me in Kitchener a couple of months ago, I asked him the question point blank, do Canadians have a distinctive country music style of their own? And he said everywhere he travels and he hears Canadian songs, the audiences, Australia especially, and France, and Scandinavia, the Canadians are known for their own distinctive quality style of music.
Isn't that interesting? Do they do an A after it, I would guess, you know?
That could be. That could
Eh?
be. Home on the Range, eh?
Yeah.
Sure, that could be. But George Hamilton...
My wife left me, eh?
He said with a smile. But George Hamilton IV said that we are recognized across the world as having our own distinct style. But still, Canadian radio plays 7 American songs for every 3 Canadian. And I resent that. That's our airwaves. Why aren't we getting more recognition?
There used to be, and now maybe they've sort of given up on some of the laws, but there used to be certain laws that we had to play so much Canadian content. Now, is that still in effect?
That's still in effect, that if you apply for a radio station license, country music format, you have to come up with a promise of performance, what good you're going to do for the community and for music, and especially country music if that's your format. One of the rules of the CRTC is that you must play a minimum of 30% Canadian content. And if you're country music, you have to play 3 out of 10 songs. Now here's the thorn that's in my side. In 1978, when the CRTC made the ruling that 30% minimum had to be played over Canadian radio stations, Canadian radio was playing 2% Canadian content in 1978, and there were 75 Canadian country music singles released in Canada. In 1992, the percentage is still 30%, and sadly enough, most radio stations use that as the maximum, not the minimum, and there are 850 Canadian country singles released last year. So Canadians are fighting for space on their own airwaves.
Yeah.
When we had 75 singles released 20-something years ago, 24 years ago, and it was 30%, and here we are, 850 released right up to December 31, and it's still 30%. So one of my campaigns is I write about it, and
What can our viewers at home do? Like, I guess they could write or call their local radio stations that they listen to and ask to hear more Canadian performers, because we have excellent performers.
Excellent performers. And when you hear, you listeners out there, when you hear a Canadian country singer singing on radio, call up. Hey, that was great. If it was great, of course, and there's a lot of good ones. Don't be afraid to do that. It's you people that buy the products that they advertise over Canadian country radio, and if you like an artist, phone up. And if it's Canadian, phone up twice.
Well, for instance, this Billy Ray Cyrus, now he's got this great hit, and it's played hourly, and you get sickened hearing it so much. Now, is there a limit on that also, you know, that you could only play?
On FM radio, you can only play hits so many times a day, or they'd be playing Billy Ray Cyrus every half hour.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
I think they do. Sometimes every time I turn on the radio, I come on the same song. Like sometimes I think I've got a tape in that's stuck on that one song.
Yeah. Billy Ray Cyrus, he's quite a story too, you know, and he's obviously very successful now. He gets about $75,000 for an hour's show, just in case you think there's no money in country music. But he was on the road for 10 years and started.
We get the same figures, but not as many zeros afterwards.
75
and the decimal point moved over.
And a piece of pizza would behave herself. But he gets 75.
I rarely get it.
But it kind of a little bit of a funny thing. I was at the Billy Ray Cyrus concert in November at Maple Leaf Gardens. It was put on for the Hugh McMillan Sick Kids Center, Marvelous project. Metro Toronto Police put it on. 16,000 people there, and I'm sitting with Walter Austin of Canada's Polka King, and I'm sitting beside the stage.
Walter.
Now there's 16,000 people there, 15,000 women. And he gets his guitar from the side of the stage, and he's walking up the steps. And right beside us was a young lady, 18, 19, with her mother. And he's starting to walk up the stairs, and what do these ladies, this young lady, 18, 19, starts saying, take it off, take it off. I said, well, let the guy get up on stage, start singing. And the mother says, no, take it off, take it off. And he got up on stage, and I don't know if some of these women heard him sing or not. Every time he'd make a move, there's some awful squealing in the audience.
Oh yeah, he's
He's quite a hunk. Is that what they
isn't
call
he?
it?
I
Peggy
think
started
so.
yelling something very similar at the last thing we were at, but she was yelling at me, "Put it on, put it on."
Well,
I know the last time we were together, I asked, you've worked or got to interview and see a lot of very famous people in the business, and I know that there are quite often funny stories to tell of things that have happened. I want to hear a couple because some of them were very humorous.
Well, this is a family show, eh?
Well, we try to keep it that way.
What time are we on? Do you know?
It's 3
Might
o'clock in
make
the
a
morning. Well, yeah, there are
We run against Whoopi.
there are some funny things that happen. The two that come to mind is I was at Maple Leaf Gardens a number of years ago, and there was a Nashville young lady singing, and she raised her arms to whatever motion she was going through, and her slip broke, and her half slip fell around her ankles. And that was a little bit embarrassing, but she never missed a note, just stepped right out of it
Stepped
and
right,
kept
yeah.
on going. Another time I'm in Ohio, I brought an act down to Ohio to perform on a television show. And we had about 1,000 people in the audience, and this, again, Nashville, and no names mentioned, I don't want to embarrass her. But she started to do this fast song, and it had something like choo 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 in it. I don't know what, a train song or something. And the third chew, her dentures flew out on the floor. And it was
Oh my!
a little bit embarrassing. And
So I do stand a chance at my age.
Yeah, she gummed the
Haven't got my
song for the
dentures
rest.
yet.
yes, she did. So
Have you ever been embarrassed? Have you personally ever been embarrassed? And
He's
I know you
embarrassed
have
right
been.
now.
have I ever been embarrassed?
I know that you have been, and I think your wife embarrassed you once, didn't she?
She's constantly embarrassing me. It's,
Sorry, Phyllis.
no, I don't recall.
Didn't when you took her to see a performer and she just went all gaga?
This was, we were at the Juno Awards a few years ago, and of course Phyllis has traveled with me to different places. We get backstage, kind of nice to have a backstage pass to meet a lot of these people, and she's generally pretty good. So we were at the Juno Awards with another gentleman and his wife. He's a booking agent, and a couple of acts nominated. And I had told my wife many, many times, one of the dumbest things I think for a performer, a well-known performer or politician or anybody do, is to have to sign autographs. People run up to them on the street, they're in a restaurant eating away, and somebody comes up and sticks a cigarette package, sign this. Like, I see no relevance in all of this. If you walk up to somebody, say, gee, I enjoy your show, thank you, and walk away. But they run up and ask for autographs. So I told Phyllis many, many times, these people are professionals, they're human beings, their time is limited. Please don't bother them when you go up, you know, and so on. And she did this very well for many years. Here we are at the Junos,
But
and nobody drank wine except this lady that is with us and Phyllis. And they got into the wine, and because it's free, my wife comes from Scottish stock, I guess, couldn't leave a drop. So they got into the wine pretty good, and Alan Thicke was the host. And Alan Thicke
Oh,
is
dear.
her most,
Her baby,
her baby. And
and he's Canadian.
yes, and
That's
she waved
important.
to him and he waved back, and that was nice. As luck would have it, he did his part on the television show. He came down to the next table, and I said, now Phyllis, leave. Oh, she's just all nervous and biting her nails and everything. So I guess I went to the washroom or something, and I came back, and there's Phyllis with her arm around him. And we have a daughter at home who's single. She's got her own teeth, lots of money in the bank. We'd like you to meet her. She's looking for a husband, and you're just a kind of, oh my goodness gracious. So that was a little bit embarrassing, but it was fun.
Did they get married? I
I
mean your
don't-
daughter now, not your wife
No,
now.
there was some girl called Gloria Loring that cut her out.
They're not together anymore. I hate to break it. Can we talk?
I'll pass that on to
Thank
Phyllis.
you. Can we talk? But I want to know what's happening in the future in Canada right now. Like, where do you see country music going?
Well,
Because I think right now we're sort of at a crossroads where everything is getting a lot of attention. Like every form of music is currently popular. Like it used to be, you had to go with the flow, and whatever was popular, everybody started. And if you liked something that wasn't popular, you'd have to go to a private little club someplace to hear it being played.
well, I can tell you that Stompin' Tom's song, now Tom is not, he's not Pavarotti by any means, but the people just love him. Every place that he plays, he sells out. And he sells product like crazy. And his song, and I just found this out from his tour manager last Sunday, it was at a fiddle show, and his song, the hockey song, is played in Madison Square Garden. The people stand up in between periods and start singing it. And Stompin' Tom, a great Canadian, and the hockey song, Ottawa, Madison Square Garden, St. Louis, they just love his music.
He's Canada.
I like his song that he came out with in the year of the 125th anniversary of Confederation.
Yeah.
And I forget what the title was, but if you don't like it, leave it. And it was about if you don't like the way we do things in Canada. And
Exactly.
I believe in downtown Toronto, I can't remember the name of the street, I'll look for it the next time I'm there and report back, but there's a huge mural on the side of a building with Stompin' Tom, and they have painted the words to his song on the side of the building, and I just think it's great that he did that. That he took a political stance through music.
And I don't know if you know the story or not, about 14 years ago, Tom was quite popular. He went into hiatus for many, many years. And 14 years ago, he was asked to do a show at the C&E. He was offered $1,200 to do an hour and 15 minutes. Charlie Pride from Nashville was asked to do 45 minutes. He got $25,000.
Oh.
And Stompin' Tom went to the people at the C&E. He says, I want more money. I'm doing twice as much and this and that. And they said, no. Tom says, take your show and put it where the sun don't shine, or whatever Tom told him. And after that, he
It
had
is a
won.
family show, remember?
He had won 4 or 5 Juno Awards. He gave them all back. He says, I refuse to. If that's how you're treating Canadians, Canadian country artists, he said, I don't want anything to do with it. And he just quit. He wasn't getting any airplay.
What a statement.
Now, the radio just love to get a hold of him. You know, he's getting 25, 30,000 a night. He's selling out every place he plays. And he always uses Canadian musicians and Canadian opening acts, so that's great. And we have some marvelous young talent coming up. Michelle Wright.
I was going to say, I think one of the big feathers in our cap as a country is the recent inaugural of Bill Clinton as President of the United States, the number of Canadians who were asked to perform at the balls. And of course, Celine Dion.
Yeah.
Of course, they're having problems pronouncing her name, so I hear they pronounce it every way but the way it's supposed to be. Bruce Cochran, and of course Ronnie Hawkins, who has played here in Brantford. And have you had the chance of interviewing any of those? Maybe Ronnie, probably.
Ronnie, I have met him many.
He's quite the character.
He's quite a guy. Do you know that his, I shouldn't say his first love because he makes his living in rockabilly, but he's an absolute.
I thought you were going to talk about his wife.
No, that's another story. He just loves symphony music. He's forever listening to the classics, and he's very, very knowledgeable. He's also a university graduate, very, very intelligent.
But I think not often do Canadians get asked to perform at big American functions like they go for the. And these people have played with Barbra Streisand, like they're playing with the big names, Sinatra and all that. So for them, it's a big step up.
So that tells Canadians that we're starting to get recognized. You made a comment on the first. Why don't you read that out?
This is just for, I don't know if we can get this, but this is on page 14 of the January edition of the country. I see you waving, Matthew. I know I'm on the wrong call. And this is Bill's Southwestern Ontario happenings. Now, before I read the article, I got to show it, because for Peggy and I, our days were made when Bill printed our photo right there. There's me, that's Peggy, in case you're confused. And in the center is Johnny B. He performed here. He is the Elvis impersonator from Los Angeles. And he was here at Danny Soho, just an excellent performer, and he promised he will do our show the next time he's in this city, so watch for that. But I'm going to read Bill's column, Ralph Nader Visits Canada. Ralph Nader, the common man's activist from Washington, D.C., visited Toronto recently to promote his latest book, Canada's First, which described all the inventions where Canadians were the first in the world to come up with them, but neglected to tell the rest of the world. Of course, that's a Canadian's word. Said Nader, Canada has so many talented people, and it's amazing that Canadians don't publicize their achievements more. Canadians seem to think that anything good always comes from the USA. Mr. Nader, Canadian Country Radio, seems to think the same way, playing 70% American and only 30% Canadian. Just like the tracking card that was passed by my way recently, which read, sorry, we can't play your excellent record, but our 30% Canadian quota is full up. what the hell would happen if a station played 31%, turn into a pumpkin or something? Very good. And so he did see that as well, and he stated that. And that was an American that said that.
That was an American. Of course, Ralph Nader now has been the common man's activist for many, many years, and he lived in Toronto for a while, so he knows what Canadians are like. They really don't wave the flag and they don't blow their own horn enough. And he wrote a book on 160 inventions that we have, including insulin and zippers and chocolate. I think we invented all kinds of things, but Canadians don't tell anybody. It's the same thing in entertainment. We have some of the finest talent in the world right here in Canada. We're recognized all over except in Canada.
Unfortunately, sometimes, and even when it does, like, I think the last time that our community got excited was either when the Queen arrived in Brantford or when the Pope arrived in Toronto. Those were the two highlights. Like, even that takes a lot of pushing. Like, we're so laid back. It'd be nice. I don't want us to become obnoxious like sometimes the Americans are, because they sometimes overdo it and it's too glitzy and glamoury. But, you know, it would be nice if for once we stood up and said, hey, I'm a Canadian, I'm really proud of it, and I'm glad of what our country can do.
We have a couple of local acts, and Peggy, of course, we hear on a regular basis, and that song she did on your Valentine's show.
We've had so many comments.
So some of the cameramen said, hey, I'll work next taping for nothing, you know. I trust Peggy's going to be a regular with you?
Yes, she is. She's joining me. As a matter of fact, the camera people suggested she take over the show and I get lost.
I don't say too much, though. This is all new for me.
Well,
you know, it's
different to be an interviewer than it is to be the interviewee.
That's right.
You know, and she's sort of gone from being the interviewee to be helping interview. So
first time I saw Peggy was back in last July. Peggy entered the Canadian Open Singing Contest in Simcoe, and Peggy finished very well. She was in the top 12-13, did extremely well. There were 77 female open contestants from right across Canada competing for $40,000.
Oh, it was thrilling.
Oh,
it's a whole weekend of it. Just everybody gets dressed and
everybody.
Everybody looks at
you. All do it so nonchalantly. Everybody
yes, I know.
At the camera.
No, they get all dressed up, and they have beer tents there, and all these
they all
cameras
get dressed
and
up to
videos.
go in the beer tents, like
you can just
Oktoberfest.
go all over. They come there and camp, and they come from everywhere. So we're getting closer to Brantford. You were saying.
I want to know,
area.
out of all the performers that are Canadian that you've got to interview or work with, who is your almost favorite? You know, top of the list, other than Peggy and I.
No. What do you mean by that? No, the most talented? Or
well, who was the best to work with, the most interesting? Who was, you know, almost like you'd known them forever? You know, they weren't stuck up and.
Well, I didn't interview her, but Anne Murray is just a wonderful lady. Just one of the nicest people you ever want to meet. And Anne Murray, Katie Lang, very, very interesting. Very intelligent. She speaks her mind.
I like that in a woman.
I like it in anybody.
And she's just doing marvelous, and always quick to advertise the fact she's touring California right now. Very quick to advertise the fact that she's from Canada and that she's from Alberta. Although she doesn't eat beef, she still loves Canada.
Yeah.
You know, it's
good for her. How would you like, I know we've talked about Peggy singing, how would you like to hear her sing again? Could she do a song for you? I think she said that she'd like to do Lovesick Blues, and I hope Phyllis doesn't get upset that that's the one she chose to sing.
It is.
Oh, great.
And
so we're going to just sort of pan over and cut and do all those wonderful magical things that they do with the camera, and we will see you on stage 2 right after this blackout, okay?
$50 a week for a year buys a kid a week off the streets and a free shot at a better life. One way you can help the most, the United Way.
I got a feeling called the blues, oh Lord, since my daddy said goodbye. And Lord, I don't know what to do. All I do is sit and cry. Oh Lord, that last long day he said goodbye. Oh Lord, I thought I would die. He'll do his got that kind of loving. And Lord, I love to hear him when he calls me sweet baby, just a beautiful dream. I hate to think it's all over. I lost my heart, it seems, 'cause I've grown so used to that man somehow. I'm nobody's sugar mama now, and I'm lonesome. I got the lovesick blues. Hey, I'm in love with this wonderful guy. That's what's the matter with me. I'm in love, and it's easy to see that he don't care about me. So I tried and I tried to keep him satisfied, but he just wouldn't stay. And now that he is leaving, this is all that I gotta say. I got a feeling called the blues, oh Lord, since my daddy said goodbye. And Lord, I don't know what to do. I lost my heart, it seems, 'cause I've grown so used to that man somehow. I'm nobody's mama now, and I'm lonesome. I got the lovesick blues. I got a feeling called the blues, oh Lord, since my daddy said goodbye. And Lord, I don't know what to do. I've lost my heart, it seems, 'cause I've grown so used to that man. Somehow I'm nobody's sugar mama now, and I'm lonesome. I got the lovesick blues. Yeah. Thanks.
And we met Peggy Pratt last year at the Canadian Open Singing Contest in Simcoe, along with 13,000 other people from all over Canada, 250 contestants. We'd like to see all you people out there. In fact, this past year in the contest, from Brantford, Jamie K. Carter, Clayton Soulier, 2 years ago, Shauna Radmore, who I understand now is in the Little Theatre, musical theatre here. Terry Sumption, of course, won it a few years ago. Great Canadian artist, doing very well. When is it this year, Peggy?
It's the July 9th, 10th, and 11th.
And that's
I've got it
Simcoe.
booked on my calendar.
Great. So we look forward to
It's a
seeing
thrill.
all you people there and support up-and-coming Canadian talent.
I'd like to thank everyone for joining us on This Is Your Show, especially today's guest, Bill Oja from Country Music News. Try to watch for this. It's an excellent paper, and watch for Bill's column. Thank you for coming.
Well, thank you for having me.
And we
Mark.
hope you'll come back again and share some more stories with us.
Doesn't Peggy do a
Peggy
great job?
Pratt, again, thank you. We'll see you
thanks,
on our
Mark.
next show.
Peggy?
We'll see you here on the next
Great.
show. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns about This Is Your Show, please contact us at 23 Harris Avenue in Brantford, Ontario, N3R 7W5. And leaving you with my thought for the week: he who speaketh by the inch and talketh by the yard should be kicketh by the foot. We'll see you next week on This Is Your Show. Take care. Bye-bye.
Man, somehow I'm nobody's mama now, and I'm lonesome. I got the lovesick blues. I got a feeling called the blues, oh Lord, since my daddy said goodbye. And Lord, I don't know what to do. I've lost my heart, it seems, 'cause I've grown so used to that man. Somehow I'm nobody's sugar mama now.